Let's talk about one of the most underrated but powerfully intimate things a man can say to a woman. Words that acknowledge her essence, not just her appearance. You see, most women have heard variations of "you're beautiful" 1,000 times. It's flattering, sure, but it's also lazy. Because any man with eyes can observe her physical features. That doesn't mean he sees her. And that's the key difference. A high-value woman wants to feel seen, not scanned, understood, not just admired. What many men overlook is how deeply women crave to be recognized in their fullness, not just the parts that are visible, but the qualities that are felt. Her calm, her fire, her intelligence, her kindness, her way of holding space in silence. These are things she pours into the world every day, often without acknowledgement. And when a man takes the time to name those invisible attributes, to say, "There's something about your energy that makes everything feel lighter," or "you have this quiet strength that's grounding," that hits her in a place no generic compliment ever could. Because now, you're not just responding to her body, you're responding to her being. And the truth is, that's what most women secretly long for. They may never admit it out loud, but when a man can reflect her essence back to her in language that is thoughtful, present, and sincere, it creates emotional intimacy instantly. It tells her, "I'm not just here for what I can take. I'm tuned in to who you are." And that's rare. You have to understand, women live in a world where their value is constantly reduced to how they look. Social media filters, comparison culture, the constant chase for external validation. It's exhausting. So when a man steps into her world and speaks to what's real, what's unchanging, it brings a sense of peace she didn't even know she needed. It doesn't have to be poetic or rehearsed. It just has to be true. Maybe you've noticed how she speaks up for others when they're being overlooked. Maybe you've seen the way she holds back her own frustration to keep harmony. Maybe you've felt the softness she brings into a space, even when she doesn't say a word. Speak to that. Say, "I noticed how you handled that situation. It showed me how much grace you carry." That may sound simple, but to her, it's profound. Because here's the paradox. The more grounded and intelligent a woman is, the less she needs your praise, but the more she values it when it's meaningful. So if you want to connect on a deeper level, stop throwing surface-level compliments and start offering reflections of her deeper self. Words that say, "I see what others miss." That's what gets remembered. That's what gets felt in the body, not just heard in the ears. It's not about manipulation, it's about presence. When your attention sharpens, when you're truly observing the woman in front of you, not just as a potential partner, but as a complex, spiritual, evolving being, your words naturally take on weight. They're no longer flattery, they're mirror. And every woman, whether she admits it or not, wants to be mirrored like that. So the next time you're tempted to say, "You look good," ask yourself, what else do you see? What does her presence do to the energy around her? What makes her unique? Not in a physical sense, but in the way she carries her story. Speak from that place. Because when you speak to a woman's essence, you don't just capture her attention, you awaken her trust. And trust is where the real connection begins. There's something powerful about a man who's not afraid to admit that a woman has changed him. Not in a way that compromises his identity or makes him dependent, but in a way that reveals growth, emotional awareness, and deep presence. Most men underestimate how much women want to know they matter. Not just in the physical space they occupy, but in the inner world of the man they're with. A woman may never ask, "Have I made an impact on your life?" But make no mistake, she's always wondering. She wants to know that her presence is felt, not just seen, that her influence reaches beyond the surface. And when a man opens up and says something like, "Since you came into my life, I've started thinking differently," or "I've been more patient, more intentional because of the way you move," it lands in a sacred space inside her. A space she rarely lets anyone touch. Because what you're really saying is, You've inspired evolution in me. That kind of vulnerability, when expressed with masculine clarity, doesn't make you weaker, it makes you magnetic. You're showing her that you're a man in motion, not stagnant, not just using her as a placeholder until the next distraction comes along, but someone who sees her as a mirror, a compass, maybe even a kind of muse, not for fantasy, but for real-life transformation. Here's the thing. Women live in a world that demands so much emotional labor from them. They're expected to hold space, nurture, advise, calm, and uplift, often without any acknowledgement. It becomes routine, unseen. But when a man pauses and says, "You make me want to be better," she softens, not because she's flattered, but because she's finally felt. This isn't about being overly sentimental, it's about offering conscious feedback. Telling her what her presence does to your mindset, your energy, your choices. When you share the inner shifts you've experienced just by observing how she carries herself, it hits differently. She's not just the recipient of your attention, she's now the catalyst for your growth. And that's where real emotional intimacy starts to take root. But here's the caveat. This only works when it's honest. Women have an intuitive radar for performance. If you're saying these things to get a reaction, or worse, to manipulate, she'll feel it instantly. But if your words come from stillness, from self-reflection, from moments where you've truly noticed yourself growing because of her presence, then it resonates at a cellular level. She won't forget that, not for a long time. And you don't need to make grand declarations. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, "You know, I never used to slow down and breathe before I made decisions, but being around you has changed that." That might sound small, but to a woman, it means everything. Because what she hears is, you're not just beautiful, you're influential, you're valuable in ways that reach beyond the surface. And that's something women rarely get to feel in romantic dynamics. They're often loved for how they make men feel, but not for how they elevate a man's consciousness. When you give voice to that impact, you distinguish yourself instantly. You move from ordinary to unforgettable. So if you're looking to create a bond that doesn't fade with time or lust, don't just admire her, acknowledge her imprint on you. Let her know that she's not just present in your world, she's shaping it. Because in the end, it's not the loud, flashy gestures that keep a woman, it's the quiet recognitions that tell her, you matter here. And when a woman knows she matters, her love deepens, her trust sharpens, and she starts pouring into you with a level of devotion that most men will never experience. One of the most electric things a man can express to a woman is desire. Not lust, but desire. That's rooted in respect, self-control, and presence. Most men either suppress their attraction out of fear of coming on too strong, or they swing in the opposite direction and express it in crude, careless ways that lack any emotional intelligence. But here's the truth that most women won't admit. They love to feel desired by a man who knows how to hold his fire. Not extinguish it, contain it. That's the difference between being seen as a boy chasing pleasure and being experienced as a grounded, masculine presence. Desire becomes magnetic when it's expressed with intention. A simple statement like, "You make it really hard to focus when you're near me, but I love that challenge," communicates both attraction and emotional discipline. It says, "I want you, but I'm not consumed by you." It's in that paradox, wanting her deeply while remaining rooted in yourself, that the feminine feels safe and excited. Because now you're not trying to take from her, you're inviting her into an energy that's both secure and thrilling. A lot of men don't realize that when they rush to express sexual interest without emotional context, they activate a woman's defenses. But when you lead with presence, when your eyes, your words, and your body language say, "I see you, and I want you, but I'm not chasing you," something awakens in her. Her trust, her curiosity, and her arousal begin to rise simultaneously. And that's where real connection lives, in the space where desire meets respect. You don't have to overthink it. Just be honest, be grounded, and be intentional. Let her know she affects you, but don't lose yourself in the process. That balance of vulnerability and control is what makes your energy unforgettable. Because ultimately, women don't just want to be desired, they want to feel safe in that desire. When you can make her feel both, she'll lean into you in ways that words can't explain. So ask yourself, are you expressing desire in a way that builds connection, or just feeding your own need for release? The answer to that question will define the kind of intimacy you're capable of creating.